is it changes every 2 years too. You know, so when it changes every 2 years, suddenly you have somebody brand new there and they don't know anything about any of this stuff. And you have to start all over again. And it takes you 2 years to teach them, and then they find somebody else again. You know, so we're in a constant teaching pattern. Whereas, I mean, we've been sitting, our council has been sitting, I mean, Howard's been in our council for at least 100 years. You know, so our council's been here for a long, long time. You know, we don't change that much. You know, and so then that's the beauty of our system. Our system tries to select the best leaders and put them in place, and they're there for a long, long time, because that's what we need in our world, is stability around leadership. So I think it's really important to recruit young people to start helping us think this stuff through. You know, help study it, help research it, help us to put together ideas around it. Because we certainly, when I look back over the last 40 years, we need all the help we can get. So we need to work directly with groups on the issue of stopping violence against women and children. I put this up here because I just can't stop talking about this issue. Because this issue is primary in our communities. There is far too much violence against women and children in our communities. And when you look at our teachings are absolutely against any form of violence, whether it's man, woman, or child. But yet, when you see violence in our communities, it means it's really a measuring stick of how far away from our culture we are, how far away from our teachings. And we need to find a way to deal with that issue. And there are lots of programs out there, but really, as leaders in our communities, we need to start advocating that. We need to start saying it and speaking to it and start helping those groups out there that are working on the issue, is helping them to do their programs or to help them figure it out, and to do more education around it, because really that violence comes from all the historical trauma that we went through, and it's not dealt with, it's unhealed, and we need to find a way to address it. I only have an hour left to go. No, we're pretty close to the end. So we were originally talking about this. I think that one of the things that we talked about as when the chiefs were, I think we were meeting in Tonawanda, but one of the discussions was that how do we take this information, put a lot more detail to it, and take it around to our communities. And so all of our communities are getting this information. I think it's really important for them to do that. So one of the things I thought of in the work that I've been doing, I thought that we need to come up with specific questions about whenever we're counseling. I mean, when we hold chiefs councils here, or whenever our traditional leadership is meeting, there are questions that we need to ask that really will help to guide the decolonization, so that we don't get into these debates against each other or against each other's thinking. And I think that it's important to do that. And in some of my writing, one of the things I put up here is that during the deliberation of councils, these questions need to be considered. And one of the first questions is, what does our inner knowledge say about this issue? And have our dreams informed us? I think it's really an important question around any issue that's confronting us, whether it's the land claims issue or, I don't know, what some of the latest issues that were being dealt with, or even the taxation issues I know at Grand Council. But there's always those kinds of issues, or even the issue around family violence. I mean, that question needs to be asked. What's our inner knowledge saying about it? Well, it's saying it's wrong, for one thing, and have we had any dreams about it that can help guide us? And I think that's important. How will this issue impact the future generations? And I think this has been a common practice in the Confederacy. They've always stated this, that we have to look at the next 7 generations. We have to look at how what we're doing today, the decisions we make today, how they're going to impact the future generations. You know, and I think that's really an important question, and it's always going to be there. The third question is, how is this issue impacting the women of our nations, and what does their voice say about it? And I think that we need to be able to ask that question. As leaders in our communities, when we're having council meeting, I know here, when we have council meeting, we always ask the women what they think about the issue. And that has always been a very grounding process, because they have a very different perspective of the world, and what they offer is something that's going to strengthen us as a people. So how is this issue impacting the women of our nation, and what does their voice say about it? I think is really critical. The next question is, how is this issue impacting the natural world, our environment, our Mother Earth? So no matter what issue you talk about, that issue is going to impact our relationship with our Mother Earth and the environment. There are stuff that's going on right now that I know that are being proposed just not very far from here. So what they call that fracking of the underground, where they're forcing natural gas out of the underground, and how that's poisoning all the water systems and that. And I know that we need to deal with that. And that issue is going to have to be addressed through all of these questions. We have to find a way to talk about those things. And how is this issue disrupting the peace, balance, and harmony of our nations and all our relations? That has to be another question. If we took these 5 questions on every issue, we should be able to have a really good discussion without getting mad over it. You know, and that's, I think it's really critical for us to be able to come to that place where we're having great debates. I've seen great debates in the Confederacy, and debating is not wrong, but I think that we have to look at the outcomes of that. The idea of debating and having these discussions is be able to come to one mind. That's one of our major teachings as a Confederacy, is coming to one mind. Not just to have a good mind, but using our good minds to come to one mind about issues. And that's really the fundamental human behavior that we're supposed to have. You know, of having a good mind and using it to come to one mind. Very simple. It's simple, but darn, it's hard to do. It's darn hard to get everybody to agree with me. No. And that's really what it comes down to, eh? Is that everybody wants somebody to agree with them. You know, and that's what we have to be able to break through, I guess, if we're going to survive. And I know we will survive as a Confederacy, but even as a stronger Confederacy, is to be able to have that one mind and be able to have operating from the good mind. You know, and when you look at the psychology of Ungual, that's really the fundamental principles. Kanigolio. That's really the fundamental definition of our psychology. If we can come to that and be that and operate from that, then we are Ungual. We are a good human being, a complete human being, an original human being, if we can do that. And that's really what decolonization is about, is coming back to that. You know, addressing all of the colonialism, getting it out of the way, speak to it for what it is, call it for what it is, and then move past it and come to that place of the good mind. So that's what I'm saying is the goal of decolonization. As it's described in the Great Law, having the ability to use the good mind, and be able to function from a place of 7 spans thick of skin. And that's what our leaders are told. But every human being in our world should be attempting to achieve that. Because someday you may be asked to lead, and you have to lead with that in mind. So when we're decolonizing, when I was looking at our teachings, particularly the condolence teachings, this is what comes out of it for me, is that there are 7 strategies for decolonizing. The first one is understanding colonialism, the personal impact of colonialism. How is it personally impacting you? What are the traumas you've experienced? What are the traumas in your family? How do you unravel that and sort that out and find your Kahnikonlio? That's critical. The second piece is reconnecting to creation. Understanding that creation that surrounds us is there to energize us. Whether it's through medicines, food, presence, spiritual presence, or sourcing all of that to feed ourselves, our spirit, and our bodies. So connecting to creation. And then the third one is the recovering of our humanity and how we relate to other human beings in non-violent ways. So when we talk about our humanity, it's our humanity without violence. That's what we have to achieve. So that's the third strategy that we need to work on. The fourth one is the recapturing of our responsibilities. Is looking at what are we responsible for, because every one of us, doesn't matter whether you don't have to be a faith keeper or chief, clan mother, whatever, everyone has a responsibility in the Longhouse and in our teachings. And what is yours? Singer, speaker, whatever, or dream guesser, what is it that is your responsibility? And there's lots of them that we need people to do. And we need to have people to learn what their responsibilities are and to recapture them. And also is to really understand that family relations are a medicine. That's what they are. Love, as you call it in English, and what we understand is that we are supposed to be a medicine for each other. And we are supposed to, our presence is supposed to doctor each other, to be able to help each other, and to support each other, and to spiritually feed each other. That's what we need to understand, how family relations are real critical to ourselves as human beings. And we need to strengthen those. And then understanding the cycle of spirituality. That understanding that when we entered this world, that we came as a sacred bundle from the sky world into this world, and that we will leave this world and return. And that it's a cycle. It's a cycle of spirituality. And the reason why it's important to acknowledge that and to recognize that is because death is often seen as a negative, and often imposed upon us as a negative, when death should be viewed as your last ceremony to return to Seguin Disos. That is what it's supposed to be. I remember one time I was asking Roy Buck, I says, what's the most important? He says, you keep saying in our teachings that, in Handsome Lake teachings, he was saying that you have to keep your important ceremonies. I asked him, I said, what is the most important ceremony? And he said for a while, and he says, it's real simple. He says, it's a burial ceremony. I says, really? That's the most important? He says, yeah. He says, you got to be able to send them home. If you can't send them home, they're going to be staying here forever. I says, well, that really makes sense to me now. You know, so that's why it's important for us to understand that cycle of spirituality. We're only here for so long, and we're going to be going on our journey. And we should honor that journey, honor that in a good way. I think that historically, when you look at the invasion and the colonialism and all the crap that has come to, and the untimely deaths that our nations experienced, yeah, we became insulated from death. We became separated from it because we experienced so much of it historically. You know, when you have generations of people passing away from diseases that we don't know where they come from, you become insulated from that, and you become very isolated. And so it becomes a very difficult period of time for us to embrace that period when our people go on. So we need to be able to embrace it in a better way. You know, and that's what the teachings tell us to do, is to be able to embrace it as we're sending that person on to home. They're going on ahead of us. You know, and we just hope we're not too far. We want to be a little bit further behind, but we don't want to catch up to them. But they're going on ahead of us. But so I think it's really important for us to really understand that death and dying cycle, that birthing cycle. All of that needs to be understood in a real clear way so that it doesn't burden us, burden our minds, so we're unable to deal with it and unable to move beyond it. I see so many people when I'm in the healing work that I've done, I've seen so many people entrapped inside the death of a relative. You know, they're living it over and over and over and over again because they haven't accepted it. They haven't accepted that person going on. You know, and it's a tough thing to do. It's tough. You know, but we have to find ways to be able to move ourselves into understanding it a little bit clearer. And the other thing I think that what colonialism has done over the are you buzzing me to quiet me or? What are the when you look at our history, right from creation to today, you look at all the stuff that we had to change. You know, I mean, we forgot our teachings, and then we had to change to go back to them. And we forgot them again and had to learn something new. And we forgot them again and we had to learn again. You know, and we are constantly in this change. But yet, I find that a lot of us today that are sitting in the longhouse, and I will make myself one of those, that get very rigid about our teachings and about our way of life. Oh, we can't accept that person. Oh, we can't do that. We're not going to make changes. We got to do it this way. You know, and when we entrap ourselves that way, then change becomes almost a barrier. There becomes all kinds of barriers around change. So when we talk about this kind of stuff about growth and development and about how we need to be stronger as a people, we need to be able to have more space. And could you imagine if we were all longhouse people today? I mean, we'd have to have a longhouse that was a mile long to have this meeting. You know, we wouldn't be able to do it here. You know, but that's the reality that we live today. So we have to find a way to accept change in our world. It has to be a value that we have, that we can change, that we can grow, that we can expand, that we can be more than we are. We have to be able to do that, but yet still honoring our traditions, still honoring our culture. in a good way. I believe that we can do that. So I call this the 7 strategies for decolonizing as Haudenosaunee. It's right in our condolence ceremony, is where I took these teachings from, this direction. And I think that we need to, I have a long paper written about it if anybody wants to take a look at it. But I think it's important for us to be able to, and I think this is just an example, is to look at our teachings and what can it tell us to do today. And that's what I try to look at, our traditional teachings. I try to say, okay, what's this telling me how I can think about this today that's going to make my life better, make other people's lives better, and still be Ungual. You know, and I think we can do that. We can do that from these teachings. And as you listen to them, I mean, there's a lot of stories in the teachings, and you listen to those stories, and what is it informing you of how about yourself? You know, can you be a better person? Is really, should be what it's telling you. How to be a little bit more open-minded, with an open heart about these teachings. Because I wanted to go back to that personal impact, as I was saying, as a first strategy. So I started putting the material together on what it is that personal impact is. And it's really discovering the power within inside of yourself, and what I call ethno-stress. And this is material that I developed back in the 1980s. It's called the disruption of the original Ungual spirit, and how that gets disrupted and what we need to do about it. What colonization has done, or the ethno-stress is a byproduct of the colonization. The ethno-stress becomes the stress that we carry amongst ourselves, and how all of us stress each other out. You know, I'll use some examples just to give you. Like Al always stresses me out. His driving is awful. He drives too slow. But I think what's important about it is understanding that ethno-stress really becomes how racism, colonialism, and all the isms out there, how they affect us and how they end up making us stressful about ourselves. So the product of it, as a result of it, is that the disruption of our identity, our joyful identity, is there. You know, so who we are, who we could be really happy, it gets disrupted. So do we really know what our real joyful self is? You know, and that's really a question that we have to ask ourselves. And have you ever, when's the last time you ever laughed till you cried? Or laughed until you wet yourself? Or laughed until you couldn't stop laughing? You know, you think about that kind of joy. And that's what it's really about. I mean, there are some people in our world that never experience that. You know, they never experience that. You know, and that's what we want to help people do. It is a result of oppressive conditions. It is a negative experience we feel when interacting with people of other culture, like when we go into town. We can have that experience. It's a feeling of powerlessness and hopelessness that gets in the way of our ability to do our very best. And that's often what we see as ethno-stress. And this is all the stuff that I had said earlier, which is really about the invasion of our territories, the epidemics of diseases, the colonialism, and the domination of our communities by external forces. And I mean, most of our communities are controlled by the outside. And when you look at it, I always say that one of the ways you can look at it is that when you have a dollar bill in your pocket, how long does it stay in the community? You know, it's gone. You know, very little of our wealth stays in our communities. We spend it outside of our community. So the outside really controls our economy and who we are as a people. by that system. So we look at these weapons of mass destruction, the diseases, the alcoholism, false treaties, stealing our children, and the policies to take away from our community. You look at all that stuff, and the question that I always ask people is that, how does it personally impact you? What does it make you feel like when we talk about those things? Religious stress, educational stress. I always like religious stress because I remember the older people, some of the older people, older than me, some of them are gone now. Many of them are gone now. I mean, they would always go to, they'd go to Longhouse, but every once in a while they'd sneak off to church. And I asked them, why are you going to church? He said, well, we just got to make sure. We got to cover all our bases. We might go to heaven or we might go to the Creator's land. I don't know, but we're ready. You think about that, that's religious stress. That's what I call religious stress. So we always stress ourselves around that. Education stress was a very common one. People are too smart or too dumb and all of that. If you go to the white man's school, you're too much like the white man, all that kind of stuff. A lot of sexism and racism in our communities. The role of men and women have been demonized throughout our communities. Economic stress, too poor, too rich, too much of this, too much of that. We have all of that in our communities too. And then our early childhood stress. All the stuff that happened to us as children. All of those are common stresses that impact us and are the result of the colonialism. So we're carrying these burdens of stress, whether they're religious, education, sex, racism, economics, or early childhood. They are like a big thumb putting pressure on us, on many of our people. And so we have these feelings, most common experience in our communities is anger and fear. And this anger and fear leads to the powerlessness and hopelessness, which further enhances the oppression. And then the oppression gets internalized. And we end up starting to beat each other up. We lose faith and belief in ourselves. We narrow our culture. Our culture is only this much stuff. It's not looking at it from a larger perspective. We put our culture under glass. Well, the culture was perfect. Probably we'll hear it over the next few days. Somebody will say, it was perfect when it was in the 1970s when we had to recital for 7 days, and that was perfect. But tomorrow's and the next few days is going to be perfect too. And that's what we have to think about. We can't allow to narrow our culture, to put our culture under glass. It's always seemed to be perfect 200 years ago. Well, before 1799, before when was Sullivan's campaigns? 1789. When you look at that, our cultures were vastly different prior to Sullivan's campaigns. We still had our longhouses, we still were living that way, all of that was going on. We had villages and all that. When they came in and burnt everything, for the next 2 years they were burning everything, and that really altered our society. And I think we still feel that today. We talk about it long enough, I can convince you that you feel that. But we do. So, as a result of those feelings around that, we have this, we try to isolate ourselves. And we end up stereotyping each other. We have this factionalism because we have all this emotion running in our world and in our communities. So the factionalism becomes prevalent. And really we adopt a survivalist behavior in our world. And that's what I say is the individualism that exists in our world. where we end up thinking about, I'm only going to care about myself. I'm only going to think of myself. I'm going to take care of myself. To heck with everybody else. You know, and that's the product. That becomes the individualism that becomes dangerous in our communities when we come to that state of mind. How the oppression affects us personally. I always say that there's 10 natural spiritual needs that we need to fulfill. We need to be seen, we need to be heard, we need to know that we are accepted and believed. We need to know that our others have faith and trust in us. We need to know our place and purpose in the world. We need to feel secure and safe and at peace with oneself. And we need to know that we are beneficial to others. And we need to love and be loved. And we need to have hope. Those are all basic spiritual needs that get disrupted in the colonialism, under the ethno-stress. We're unable to self-actualize our full human potential, and we create patterns in our lives to try and fulfill our frozen needs. Our natural spiritual needs are not met, and they create a frozen need that we create behaviors around. And these behaviors oftentimes create more bad behavior. So we need to do something about the oppression. I mean, this is just an example of one of the socialization, which is really what we can call the oppression. I mean, we can get socialized by it. There's a stigma attached to it. There's shame attached to it. And then there's silence. And then if we're going to heal it, we need to reclaim who we are. We need to have unconditional acceptance of ourselves. We need to be connected with others. And we need to speak up about what is going on in our world. And that's oftentimes is not being done. We need to speak up about the violence in our communities, in our world, and we need to take action around that. So this is just an example of the highs and lows that we experience individually, where we can be happy at one moment and we can slide right down into a depression, and hopefully that we can rise above it. And that if we don't accept change, we get disillusioned by life. And we need to find ways to do that. And if we don't climb out of that depression, then it's always hostility that we move towards. And this has been understood as a process of transition. We need to find ways to be more proactive around it. So the purpose for correcting the internalized depression is simple. We need to accept change. We need to watch our thoughts. They become words. Watch our words. They become actions. And watch our actions. They become habits. And watch our habits. They become character. And watch your character. It becomes your destiny. So don't be an oppressor. Be kanigolio. Danito.